retired. And today I have a panelist who's not retired, who's actually working very hard at many different topics. Christopher Lang is a major in the U.S. Army Reserve and currently serves as the Anti-Terrorism Officer for the U.S. Army Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations Command, Airborne, USA KPOC A.
Yeah, USA KPOC. It's a fun acronym.
KPOC is good? Okay. As a company commander during the fall of Afghanistan, he led a logistical unit in high-stakes operations. From a rural town in central Pennsylvania, Christopher is also the vice president of Operation Honor, Rural Salute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to connecting rural veterans with the community and support services nationwide. As a co-founder of Operation Honor, Rural Salute, he is passionate about bridging the gap for veterans in underserved areas and fostering a sense of belonging across America, something that's sorely needed for our veterans. He has a disclaimer. He notes that any opinions expressed are his own and not those of the Department of Defense. Today's discussion is going to, I told him he was actually picking a very easy topic: anti-terrorism and current events. We have so many things going on worldwide, and this is really a complex issue. But I'm going to let you lead into it, Chris, and tell me, what are some of your major concerns right now?
It's almost easier to say like what we're not concerned about. Like there's just so much going on everywhere. Like that's one of the things. Current events is an easy topic. There's stuff going on everywhere, but it's like, okay, so what are we actually going to drill down into? I mean, obviously we got the stuff that happened on in the new year, and I know they're looking at the killing of United Healthcare. They're trying to start to spin that as an actual terrorist event. If you look at the Army's definition of terrorism, it's people using violence to try and further their political goals, which trying to lower down healthcare and all that, or going along with his manifesto, Luigi's manifesto. Like, sure, that it kind of fits, but I don't know. It's weird. It's going to be interesting to see how that court case plays out.
Yeah. And then one of the things that really that was standing out to me is that the Louisiana incident and also the incident outside of Trump's Tower, that they were perpetrated by two veterans, and both of them were Army veterans. And it made me really start thinking about it, because both of them, it sounded like they had some mental health problems in the background or some imbalance in their life situation. And it made me really stop and think, is it that because I believe the gentleman from who was actually sort of blew himself up in this car, he actually was on leave, I believe, from Germany, and came in. And I'm wondering, are we doing enough, as far as the mental health concerns of our veterans? We know that we have many homeless veterans, and thank God this is a very rare event that we're seeing right now. But it speaks to the need that we have in the country for mental health services and making sure that we have that connectivity. I mean, I think you're way ahead of this game on this with the, Operation Honor, Rural Salute, reaching out to veterans before they get into desperate situations, and actually pulling some out of those. So that is actually, one answer to this. But, what are some of your thoughts around that, about the ability for people to contend with some of the things, transitioning from the military back into life, potentially being homeless, those kinds of things?
So that's kind of one of the things that I really like getting at, that I think the biggest anti-terrorism tool that we can use is mental health resources. Well-adjusted people generally don't blow themselves up.
Right.
I'm not aware of anyone that has, but it's kind of a tragic thing looking at both of their cases. I mean, everybody is right now trying to make the connections, and I feel like a lot of it's apophenia. Like they're just looking for patterns that aren't necessarily there. Yes, they were both in Afghanistan. Yes, they were both at Fort Bragg. I don't think there's a large likelihood that either of them ever connected. That the stuff that links them is fairly, or it's just coincidental. But yeah, unfortunately, both of their lives seemed like they were taking a downturn. I know for the Louisiana attacker, he was actually barred from reenlistment and whenever he was active duty, and somehow that bar got lifted for him to join the reserve. And then he finished out and was still a 20-year veteran, and got out of the reserve. From what I can tell from everything that I'm reading, he was actually radicalized after his time in the military. But like, who knows what he was getting into while he was there? But it doesn't seem like we actually saw any of the radicalization, factors, markers, until he was out. But yeah, we know there's a picture floating around on the internet of his mugshot from getting a DUI. I know he was having family issues. His initial plan was to kill his whole family before going down to New Orleans. And that's another one of those weird coincidences between the two, is that both of them live pretty far away from their targets. The Special Forces Sergeant, I can't remember exactly where he was, but Elon Musk actually came out, and because he was driving a Cybertruck, he had to stop in to the charging stations and Elon Musk was able to, or whoever he had in his company, was able to plot out this guy's route, like where he started and each station that he stopped at when to get down there, because I could have a specific marker for your vehicle.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's where the similarities stop. The New Orleans attacker, he was ISIS inspired, which was kind of strange that the FBI came out immediately like, oh, we don't think this is a terror attack. He had an ISIS flag in his truck.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of one of those like, hey, as soon as we get into it, like, oh, hey, these are bad guys. We know this symbol.
Yeah, talk about a red flag. No pun intended.
yeah. But no, there's just too many reports going on right now to know exactly what happened. But from being a survivor of mental health issues myself, the stuff that you think is real whenever your mind's not in the right place, like the weird paths that you go down. There's an interesting thing called anti-self confabulation, where people with depression, like their mind does backflips to tell them really terrible stories about themselves. Like the whole, it's like, oh, nobody actually cares about me. And then someone's like, actually, no, I care about you. And then your mind will change that. And it's like, oh, well, I'm such a piece of crap that this person, like I was able to trick them into caring about me. But, all this weird stuff just starts to seem real, and it's not. It is, I don't know from like an evolutionary perspective, like what benefit that would have, but it's just one of those really sad things that whenever people start having all sorts of bad mental health issues, all sorts of awful things that seem real are real to them. Like the manifesto that the Special Forces Sergeant sent out to the Sean Ryan show, like a lot of that is, I mean, I know there's always stuff the U.S. government is doing that we're not all going to know about, but, talking about like anti-gravity technology that China has that's launching drones the size of buses. I don't know. It seems to me that like every single time China comes out with some new piece of technology, it's like, oh yeah, this will like, change the world. Then the US, like freaks out and sends billions of dollars to the military industrial complex to come out with something that's, like so much better than it. They do. And then they realize the piece of technology that they had wasn't that great to begin with. And we really didn't need to be that worried. So as far as that, I'm not sure that like, that's actually something that people need to be worried about that's in his manifesto. I mean, again, there's always stuff that's going on that I'm not read in on. So, but I don't know. the thing that I see with those two guys is that their lives were starting to go south. Oh, and for him, he got caught cheating by his wife, and she had left it like a couple days before, and so it was, I think it was like right before Christmas, and that's already a hard time. So yeah, like both of them, their lives were starting to go downhill. You know, for the New Orleans guy, he unfortunately had some people that were, you know, sort of like pushing him along, considering he was radicalized. But like for the special forces sergeant, like I think it was both of them was just a mental health issue, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of comforting in a way because, in a sense, because it wasn't that they were objectively, hopefully, they weren't objectively looking at this and saying this is a valid way of expressing myself after having my military experience and training. You know,
yeah,
that this is something okay to do, and tragic in the sense that they both probably could have been saved if there had been an intervention earlier with mental health, you know, to get them on a different course, a different track. As you were saying, you know, they were probably confabulating all kinds of ideas, or you know, having ideations about things, and making up monsters about, you know, what was going on. For you to turn around and say, "I'm going to kill my family," it's like, wow, you know, you've taken another step in another direction. Um,
yeah, it's way down
but you
there.
know, yeah, yeah. But what are some of your things about anti-terrorism? I mean, do you think that we need to be more alert as a nation now? And I'm looking at, you know, the physical implementation of things like what happened in Louisiana and what happened in front of, you know, Trump's residence. But we have the cyber side of things too, and we seem to be being more attacked to me on the AI side and the cyber side than we are, you know, physically having someone in front of you. And that can be, I think, just as, you know, just as destructive to our society and to our way of living.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So I'm lucky that I've got a cousin that's fairly high up in the cybersecurity, I guess, realm of business,
Okay.
and I talk to him a lot. He's a writer. He's got a great book out there called Rogue States, named Steve Lang, and it
Rogue
is,
State. Okay.
he just sort of took a bunch of stories that he's got and like put them all into one book. It's quite the read. But talking with him, like the only reason that you and I have not been targeted is because we're not a juicy enough target. That if something's online, it's
Mm.
able to be breached. And what is it? I've got a buddy that went cyber in the army that he and I were in a maneuver captain's career course together, and then, you know, we both went off different directions. You know, I left the infantry, went to logistics, and he went to cyber.
Mm.
And yeah, some of the stuff that he's telling me is absolutely horrifying. But
Mm.
it's again, it's one of those like scary but comforting things at the same time. There's
Mm.
a quote in the first Men in Black movie where Agent K is talking. He's like, there's always something going on. There's always, like, you know, this alien bug that's going to kill us, or, you know, like this alien spaceship that's coming in to blow us up. And the only reason that society continues is that people don't know about it. Because, like, if we were constantly aware of all the threats that there were to us, we would be like, everyone would be gray and losing their hair.
Oh, and be helpless would be just laying on the ground waiting for.
Yeah. Like, it just, there's so many like existential threats out there. But the one thing from my aspect with you know, the anti-terrorism and physical security thing is it's hard to sell it because it's inconvenient, and that's the biggest issue that I've got with the program with my unit in the army, is that like getting commanders to understand is like, hey, the United States is not the sanctuary that it once was.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
you know, the enemy is in the wood line. Like, we are being watched. We have, you know, Chinese police stations in our own country that we don't know about. We know that we what is it? A guy that I actually work with a couple years ago, he was his wife was contacted by a Wagner recruiter,
Mm.
and here in Fayetteville. But yeah, the enemy is out there, and people just get really complacent, And mostly that's because doing security is inconvenient. And that's we actually had a meeting this morning where we were talking that one of the best ways to, like save people's lives, to, like, and continue pushing the security and beating the bad guys are there drum, is just by being a pain. And it's not a fun job to do. But you think about that security expert that was in the World Trade Center. He knew that what is it? He, did his research. He had some buddies out there, and they said, "It's like, yeah, you're probably going to get a bomb in the garage." And so he had a plan for whenever somebody drove a car bomb into the the garage at the bottom of the World Trade Center, and he knew what to do. And then whenever one of his buddies told him that, like, yeah, for my expertise, I believe that we're probably going to get hit by a plane next. So he had his guys. I think it was one of the investment companies. I can't remember the name of the company to save my life right now. But anyways, the guy had the employees practicing these drills, and I'm sure everybody thought it was a giant pain until their building got hit by a plane, and then he got all of his people out. And I mean, the dude was a freaking hero. He went back in and didn't make it out, but yeah, you just kind of have to be a pain to people because yes, it's inconvenient. Nobody wants to, continuously do these really frustrating things. They want to, like, have a simple life. You gotta avoid complacency, though. Like,
yeah. That's really a very important point. Is that we can get lulled into a sense of security, and it's really actually part of the Constitution, and part of the Declaration of Independence. Really, were focused on having tranquility and a peaceful, society where you could thrive. And, that was the kind of a notion undergirding it, is that you wouldn't have to worry about being invaded, or you have, protective force around you that keeps you safe and your family safe at night. And, so, being pulled away from that for a moment to say, oh, bad things do happen, is really shattering for people, I think, in the general population. People who are in the, who are first responders and people who are in the military, have actually been trained to respond to things differently. It's like running towards, it's the old story of the, of the sheep herder, right? And that, we have to, be on guard for people. But now we're starting to move into a time period. And what was interesting to me about what happened in Louisiana was the rapidity with which the people in Louisiana stood up and said, this happened, but we're going to go on. And it reminded me of what happens in Israel. This has been going on for decades now, where in Israel they'll clean everything up. You have a bombing, you have something happen, they clean the site up completely and say, get back to the restaurant. Keep going on with life. And it really, it's to try to lessen the impact or the supposed reward for those people who want to do devious deeds and do things to get a reaction from people. But returning to a normality in a relatively quick period of time is really an important thing to happen.
Oh yeah, I mean, Israel, they're just sort of used to it, so it's just like, all right, so whatever, it's on Tuesday. But I don't like the whole thing, like, with 9/11, it was like, okay, so we're never going back to the way things were. It's like, all right, yeah, I get that a little bit. You can't give up your freedoms, though. Like, you still have to live. The whole thing is like, okay, so now we're going to absolutely watch everybody everywhere to make sure nobody's doing anything, but somehow these guys still slip through with all the, surveillance that the country has on us. That, I like the juxtaposition between like Tel Aviv and New Orleans, because Tel Aviv, okay, cool, it's just another missile, but New Orleans, like, terrorist attacks don't happen like that much in this country.
Right.
But yeah, it's nice to see them like, all right, so yeah, this was a really bad thing. We need to get back to partying, because that's the whole thing.
Yeah. But, not to let them have a win. Right.
Yeah. What is it? I did a study in college. I wrote a paper on PTSD, it was in the English Navy. The sailors that consumed their rum ration were actually 80% less likely to get shell shock than the ones that didn't. So, like maybe it's, a little bit of booze and on Bourbon Street helped them out, helped them be like, all right, yeah, we're good. We're moving on.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it was a weird statistic.
Of course, if they drank enough of the rum, they may not even know if anything happened, but that's another story. But that's really interesting study. But we have multiple countries now, and without getting into all the geopolitical stuff in the background and all the controversies and all that, but we do have, we have several countries that are looking at, taking sovereignty away from other countries. We have Russia, we have North Korea, we have China, with Taiwan, North Korea with South Korea, and then we still have the war going on overseas now with Russia, invading Ukraine. So, I'm wondering, what is it that we need to do to talk to the American people for them to understand?
Oh, I still got you.
Yeah, oh, you still got me? Okay. Yeah. And for some reason, a Teams thing came up, which I'm not even working with. But so this thing about when people are actually, engaging in dictatorship, acts of dictatorship, for people here to understand that this is really not the desirable thing. This is not something that is consistent with our Constitution or what we are trying to do. That radicalization of the people, like in New Orleans, you have to take a jump from why we are the greatest nation on earth, right? Why we espouse the things that we want to espouse about being free, about having family, having, a prosperous nation, being, in a more uplifting kind of view. And when you jump into a radicalized mentality of just indiscriminately killing people, it's really a mind bend. And with this social media thing now, and with Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, we have Twitter, we have all these things out here. Now the freedom of speech is being questioned about whether they should be open platforms, so people can say what they want to say. I just hope that there is a way of educating people in the country on why things were established the way they were, with a constitution, with a Declaration of Independence, and how and what the moral fabric of the country is, why we do the things the way we do.
Absolutely, yeah. The sad fact of the matter is the virtues that the country was founded on, founding fathers didn't follow all of them. A lot of the founding fathers owned slaves and all that. And the way that we avoided taxes whenever the country first came around is by selling off land to the Native Americans.
Right.
The great thing about the Constitution, though, is that, like, as we've gone on, we have done more to follow the philosophy that was used to create the Constitution. Man is fallible. We all make mistakes. And the founding fathers were not perfect, but we're just lucky enough that there were enough philosophers inside that group. And then I like when people say, it's like, oh, the founding father would have hated this. The founding fathers hated each other. Like, those guys fought often. There was there were so many fractured groups within that. And the reason that George Washington became president so easily is because he was at the end of the revolution, the one guy that everyone's like, oh yeah, that dude's a really stand-up guy. We all like him. So he just sort of came out on top that way. But yeah, as we go along with the country and progressing towards the future, it is that education thing of, trying to let everybody know that this is why we are
Mhm.
how we are is because this is the foundation that our country is built upon, is that, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which was
Right.
also plagiarized, but it's still a great, like, plagiarism works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's the whole thing that goes back to being stewards of freedom. I like the Thomas Jefferson quote: "From time to time, the tree of liberty must be refreshed with the blood of patriots and tyrants." Like, every once in a while, like, we do need uh, to ensure that the good guys are actually the ones in power, and we have it set up so that we can have peaceful revolutions, like, every 2 and 4 years with elections and all that. But it's if we get complacent and we let things go by, then we let the people that are trying to use violence to push their political goals actually get into political power.
Yeah.
And you see that happening on countries like all over the world, where was it? I was reading a study on Palestine of why use violence as opposed to work in the political system. And everything sort of boils down to resources, is that they got more bang for their buck by blowing things up than they did by working within the system. And
Wow.
that's a flawed system. That's a system that would, over here we would call that, like, incredibly corrupt.
Yeah.
So I'm again going off on, like, a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, in order to keep ourselves safe, we have to be completely vigilant. We, need to live our lives, but you still need to be paying attention to the threats that, are external and internal and are with the country. And, whether it's, people trying to influence with radicalization, or, people that are very well trained in violence that are having mental health issues.
Right. Right. Well, Major Christopher Lang, of course, we've come to the end of the show. Every time we start talking, we can go on for hours, I know. And
Oh, yeah.
this year is going to allow us to be, allow us to be coming back forth again and again, because I know this is going to be a very interesting year as far as geopolitics goes around the world, global politics. But thank you for your service. And I really am glad that we had the opportunity to talk today, and we're going to move on to another show. But you are great, the anti-terrorism officer for the U.S. Army Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations Command, Airborne.